Well, hello my dear friends. Today we have a geld with a cracked bridge that's pushing forward a very tall saddle, which is contributing to that problem. We have a little bit of a lift in the back, not the worst I've seen, but the problem really appears to be in the front, where you can see that the finish is buckled. Perhaps it was left in a warm car. But I think that saddle is way too tall, and the leverage of that saddle has pushed it forward. You can see the crack there on either end, because the saddle is a little bit on the high side. I don't know if you can see it. There's a lot of pressure pulling forward on this string, and the bridge just couldn't take it anymore. And it didn't really need to be. The action certainly is higher than it needs to be. I mean, we could come down 1/16 of an inch on that, and that would probably solve a lot of problems right there. But when that cracked and moved forward, it also affected the finish in the front. Here, buckled up. So, hot car, dehydration. I tell people, guitars like what people like. 45% humidity, 72 degrees, pina colada, toes in nice crystal clear water with toes in the water and the palm tree swaying. Anyway, what else we got here? Let's look okay. That one's got a bit of a bow. I realize now that I should have probably checked the height of the nut slots. A little further into the video, we'll discover that the nut slots are too low. I'm pretty sure this is not the original saddle. It's way too thin, it's way too tall. The height caused the stress on the front of the bridge. The bridge pulled forward, it buckled the finish. Definitely have to do a little finish touch up here. I think someone put in that taller saddle to compensate for the low nut slots and the improperly adjusted neck. About 0.4 millimeters at the lowest point. It's about 0.016 of an inch. I like to heat the bridge up to about 250 degrees or so. It seems to be the magic number for most adhesives. I find this Harbor Freight infrared thermometer quite handy for getting a general idea of what the temperatures are running at. About $20. Good investment. I'm going to try a little experiment here. I'm going to use the mirror to bounce the laser thermometer up at the area just underneath the bridge. Just see what the temperature is. I know the shop is only about 69 degrees, and I'm showing about 90 degrees there, so apparently you can do that, and that's kind of useful to know. I wouldn't expect it to be as hot on the inside as it is on the surface of the bridge. Not too much change on the inside. Feel it with my hand. And we'll give it a go. Well, I didn't expect it to let go so suddenly and violently, but no matter. We're going to do some touch-up on the front of that bridge anyway. I don't think it really caused any damage there. I'm going to try some black super glue as a finish to touch up this front here. It wet sands, it buffs. The only thing you have to make sure is that you give it a good shake. I'll actually just shake it every once in a while because the pigment does settle in this, and you'll get like a clear translucent color, and you want to get all the pigment in there that you can get. I think we can save this bridge. We're going to dye up some marine epoxy and work it in there real good. I mixed up a little bit of medium brown color tone dye and added it to the marine epoxy I just mixed up, just to tone it a little bit so it blends in with the color of the wood a little bit better. Just a few molecules on the tip of the toothpick will do just fine. It's important to do this while the epoxy is still thin and hasn't started to set up, so it flows deeply into the crack. I am also going to apply some into the front of the slot as well. Hopefully it won't crack in two as I flex it. I know I've gotten the epoxy effectively throughout the entire crack because I can see it coming out from the other side. Also, I want to make sure that there's no remaining residual epoxy after I clamp it in the slot. We don't want to have to reroute that slot if we can help it. I've wet sanded the front of the bridge there where I touched it up with black super glue, and we'll just buff that out. Okay, I'm going to score the finish, but first I'm going to put whatever's handy, in this case a toothpick, to create a shim to lift up the side of the bridge so I can toe in my razor just underneath the edge of the bridge. And I'm going to go in at an angle. I don't want to cut into the wood, I just want to score the finish. If you can't see where you're cutting, it's better to stop short of the very end of the corner. Take the bridge off and just do it by hand afterwards. Now we'll do the same thing for the front side. When doing the ends, don't use too much pressure with the razor blade. It'll want to sink in because you're cutting in the direction of the grain. It's very soft, so go very gently. Make sure it's secure and it's not jiggling around or moving around, and it's staying exactly where you want it to be before you cut. There. back drag a little. Cleaning up the glue from underneath the bridge can take a while, so we're going to speed this up a little bit. Because I towed in the cut a little bit to be a little bit under the bridge, I'm going to compensate by scraping away the outer edge of the bridge with a little razor and a block of wood that I made up. And I really don't want to go any deeper than the thickness of the finish. I just want to, I want as much gluing area as I can get, but I want a good clean look at the same time. So this is my approach to solving that problem. I made this little gizmo with a sliding arm that's adjustable, and I use it to copy the inside of the bracing pattern so I can make clamping calls. I have a whole bin full of clamping calls that I can dig through and pick out something that matches, or if it doesn't match, I can modify it to fit. I mean, Seth doesn't like it. Some people don't like these jigs. I find it does the thing. Works just fine. One clamp. I've never had a bridge come up having used one. Works really well. I think it applies sufficient pressure, especially with my big Mongo clamp there. Sometimes getting these bridge pins out of there from all the glue squeeze out, they kind of get stuck in there. So I just use a soldering iron to make a starter hole and put in a wood screw and a little leverage system there and just pop it right out. Someone gave me this bottle of stuff called glue goo, and it really does seem to work pretty well. Sort of smells like vinegar, which leads me to think you could probably just use vinegar. Works pretty well for dissolving that tough stuff in the corners. So that original saddle was pretty thin and way too tall. So we're going to make a new saddle here. Ah yes, the sound of a nice firm fit. We know it's not going to lean forward. It's a little extra tall right now. You can just sort of see where we're at, and we're going to cut it down to the proper height. Nice squeaky fit. It matches the radius of the fingerboard much better. I'm going to clean up the fingerboard, give it a nice uniform appearance. Okay, it's time to contend with the little crack. I rubbed some fish glue into it a few days ago. I'm going to sand it flush, give it a little bit of a wet sand, and we'll buff that out. And I'm going to add a cleat on the back of that to prevent it from spreading any more in the future. I use magnets to keep it in alignment and put it exactly where I want. First I'll determine where put magnets on the cleat, put a magnet on the outside, drag it into place where I want it, and then I tape them down so they stay where I want them. I take the cleat back out, apply glue, and let it sit for a day. Well, that's a problem. Looks like we're going to need to make a new nut as well. Good practice to score along the front of the nut and oftentimes on the two ends. Pop. I'm using a carpenter's pencil that I've ground down so it has a flat side and a razor sharp edge to it, and it'll give me a guideline when I go to shape the nut. Usually when I'm making a nut, I'll make I'll use my smallest file and I'll get the slot started just to mark it off and to give the spring something to sit on while I just check the spacing. And then I will sand it and bring it over to the buffer and buff it out nice and shiny. And then I'll put it back on the instrument and finish shaping the slots to their final fit. Freshening up my line so when I cut the slots I don't go past that line. I may also use a feeler gauge to prevent the saw from going deeper than it should. I'm going to add a few hundredths of an inch there. Should probably glue the nut a little more secure. I just use a very small amount of glue because I don't want to have to clean it up all over again. I just wanted enough to hold it in place while I cut the slots. Then I'll clean up that little bit of glue and put a fresh coat of glue on that. Oh, dusty brush off. You're kind of a nut. Get it? See what I did there?